it was shots all the time on shift. It was finish a shift and have a celebratory drink followed by another, then you go out and then you have many more, and then you get 2 hours sleep and you come back at 9 in the morning and you do it all over again, and it becomes a cycle that eventually becomes a vicious cycle and a pretty toxic way to exist, actually.
When people are feeling depressed, they're more likely to drink alcohol because it's associated with feeling a bit more relaxed. It can numb some of the problems. It can help people feel a bit more in the moment, worrying less about things. It kind of makes you feel a bit better for a short time. But then, if you're drinking on a regular basis, alcohol is often described as a depressant, and gradually, it can make your worries and anxiety worse. It can gradually bring your mood down.
The pint is one of the most iconic and important traditions in UK culture, and alcohol-free beer is obviously traditionally you've only ever got it in a bottle, and we're amazing as human beings. We all want to feel included. You don't want to be the only person in a group with a bottle of beer rather than a pint. So it's always been an ambition of ours to get Lucky Saint on draft, and I always say, like, as soon as Lucky Saint's on draft, like, all beers become equal, or as soon as alcohol-free beer is, to have it on draft, like, all beers become equal.
Say it again.
Welcome to episode 5 of Same Again, a podcast about beer, pubs and mental health. Over the next half hour or so, we're going to continue our exploration of some of the complex ways in which beer, pubs and mental health are intertwined. From the ways in which alcohol can adversely affect our mental health, to the positive impact that socialising with friends in the pub can sometimes have on our well-being, and the excellent work in terms of fundraising and awareness raising that's going on in breweries and pubs around this topic. And in this episode, we're going to start by taking a closer look at depression. Just to note before we begin, I'm going to give you some information later on where you can get help if you're struggling with your own mental health. But just to warn you, we'll be discussing issues such as addiction, depression and suicide in this episode. Depression is a word we often use quite casually. For example, it's not unusual for someone to say, "I'm feeling a little bit depressed today." But what do doctors mean when they talk about depression? Same Again's resident psychiatrist, Dr Graham Campbell.
So depression is a really common mental health condition. We all have a sense of what low mood is. We all have low moods at times. Again, these are normal experiences. We don't always feel good. When bad things happen in our life, or when we lose people we love, or stressful times, we can feel pretty down. And again, we usually come out of it. It's something that's usually quite self-limiting, that we feel down for a bit and gradually we start to feel better again. When it becomes very persistent, and we usually say, if it's most of the day, nearly every day for a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, if it's really persistent and it's starting to affect your ability to enjoy things in life, or experience any pleasure, or function, or sleep, or if it's affecting your appetite, your relationships, then that's when it's important to speak to somebody and try and get some help. So symptoms of depression can include feeling really down, and that can be really just having lots of negative thoughts about yourself, about other people, about your work, your home, your life, society, anything really. It's like the opposite of having rose-tinted glasses. But when everything starts to feel like really hard and negative and bleak and hopeless, but it can also be a really physical condition as well. So for some people, just like having pains that are difficult to work out, stomach pains or general aches in the body, feeling of loss of energy. Everything's a struggle. Again, that sort of loss of hope for the future, a sort of sense of pessimism. And sometimes people have just, strange pins and needles or just strange sensations in their body. It can just feel, really, really unpleasant physically. We probably inherit to some degree a propensity to low mood, or to, so there's a term called neuroticism, which is not about being neurotic, but about experiencing things very strongly, and so experiencing negative emotion very strongly, and we may inherit a propensity to that sometimes. Again, we might learn through our life different ways of relating to ourselves and other people, and sometimes, if we learn a very negative pattern of thinking from people that we have grown up with, then that can become a problem in itself and bring our mood down. Again, depression can be associated with life stresses. So, bad things happen to us, and our lives wouldn't be normal if bad things didn't happen. It's such a common thing. We all have bad times. So, but so that can sometimes trigger depressive episodes, but there's not always a trigger. And sometimes people it comes on, it just starts to happen. And the trick is kind of noticing it and speaking to people and getting help.
So what role might alcohol, or indeed other drugs, play in depression?
Sometimes alcohol and drugs can be a trigger. So if you're using any substance regularly, whether that's benzodiazepines like Valium or alprazolam, Xanax, those kinds of things, or ketamine, cannabis, alcohol, all these kind of drugs can over time bring our mood down, because our mood is a little bit like a seesaw. It goes up and down, and the more we push it up, then our brains adapt and bring it down. And so if you're using any substance on a regular basis, then that can sometimes worsen depression. When people are feeling depressed, they're more likely to drink alcohol because it's associated with feeling a bit more relaxed. It can numb some of the problems. It can help people feel a bit more in the moment, worrying less about things. It kind of makes you feel a bit better for a short time. But then if you're drinking on a regular basis, alcohol is often described as a depressant, and gradually, it can make your worries and anxiety worse. It can gradually bring your mood down. And it's really, alcohol is not great for the body and brain, in excess. In small amounts, we can metabolize it quite well. But when drinking regularly, and in high amounts, it's pretty toxic. And so physically it can have that negative effect on mood.
If we're honest with ourselves, those of us that enjoy beer, particularly if we've also suffered with low moods at times, probably already know all this. In fact, we've probably already lived it. More and more of us are recognising the sometimes negative impact of the overconsumption of alcohol on our mental health, and many of us are already trying to do something about it. In fact, according to research by Cam Media and Lucky Saint, 3/4 of us are actively moderating our alcohol consumption, and mental health is one of the top reasons we give for doing so. Luke Boase is the founder of Lucky Saint, a dedicated alcohol-free beer brand that's been around since the end of 2018.
It all originated from this kind of thought, what if all the occasions on which I drink beer could come with or without alcohol? Because on paper, alcohol-free beer is the most amazing proposition for the right time, the right person, the right occasion. But in reality, I wasn't even close to being a consumer of it. But I wanted to be. So that was the start point. It's like, one, can I brew a beer that's good enough to bring people into the category, and then is it possible to build this brand that will be aspirational and make it a positive choice?
After a 2-year journey that took in 6 breweries in 3 different countries, Luke eventually found somewhere to brew his beer, a 400-year-old family brewery in Bavaria. And just a few years later, Lucky Saint now claims the title of the UK's #1 dedicated alcohol-free beer brand. But Lucky Saint isn't just a beer for teetotalers. The brand's own research indicates that fewer than 20% of their consumers drink only alcohol-free. The rest still drink alcohol at times, but perhaps they're looking to moderate.
If we step back and just look at how people are approaching kind of consumption in general, whether that's food or drink, or looking after themselves in terms of like exercise and just staying active, it's all, I always think it's kind of all part of the same thing. And we look at how people are eating less meat now and the vegan movement, but it's not, people eating less meat is not just driven by vegans. It's also driven by people looking to take healthier choices. And I think the moderation in drinking is the same. Like, we've now got 3 out of 4 people in the UK are looking to moderate the amount of alcohol that they drink. That's not to say that everyone's going teetotal. There is clearly a movement around that, but the vast majority of it's driven by people who are trying to, drink on a little bit less in the moments that they are drinking, or a little bit less frequently in terms of the number of days per week or per month that they're drinking. And that all, I think, comes back to looking after yourself physically, and then increasingly there is also a piece around mental health, which is recognising, I think, increasingly that alcohol isn't necessarily it can have negative impacts on your mental health.
So, lots of us are moderating our alcohol consumption. But as we've heard before on this podcast, not everyone's journey with alcohol is the same.
My name is Noah Villeneuve, and I'm the head of creative development at Club Soda. My CV has taken many twists and turns. I was a musician from the age of 13, performing shows, every week for, whilst people were going out with their friends and kind of, I don't know what normal kids do, what normal teenagers do, but what I did was I was playing shows in bars and clubs that I couldn't get into legally, but I could play there, and that's how I learned to drink. Like I was playing in sticky floor rock venues and making friends with bartenders who would, give me beverages at a far too young age, and so that's how I cut my teeth in music. And I eventually did a degree in songwriting. I, after that, ended up doing some tour management work and was an assistant on the road for some pop stars. People call it glorified babysitting, but it was really just an incredible way to see the world and meet amazing musicians and living the touring dream, really. My favourite film is Almost Famous, and I was really living out that dream. And it's safe to say my alcoholism got the better of me, and that's partly the reason why that was cut short, and that the way I was behaving was not sustainable in that career. So when I left that, I found the next thing I could find that was accepting of that behaviour, and that's when I got fully into hospitality. I'd worked in pubs on and off around music when we'd be off tour, or I'd worked in record shops, pubs, and even a milkshake shop kind of for the first 10 years of my working life. And then from around 24, I got a lot more serious about hospitality and started working in cocktails. Alcohol played a very main role in my life when I was coming up as a cocktail bartender. It was very work hard, play hard. There was still a very old school mentality around booze. It was shots all the time on shift. It was finish a shift and have a celebratory drink, followed by another, then you go out and then you have many more, and then you get 2 hours sleep and you come back at 9 in the morning and you do it all over again. And it becomes a cycle that eventually becomes a vicious cycle, and a pretty toxic way to exist, actually. And, you know, I had dealt with problems with drugs earlier than people should in my teens, and I got clean for the first time at 21. Getting back into hospitality, drugs started to sneak their way back into my life, and then really toying with my mental health, and I guess the alcohol consumption got really out of hand really fast, but everyone else was seemingly doing it the same until they weren't. And then I looked around, and actually I was taking it much more further than other people, and it's not uncommon. And I did know some people, but in my immediate circle it seemed like I was taking things much more in extreme ways, you know, waking up and making sure there was booze to hand. It didn't matter what time it was, right? So, and then, you know, I was more or less drunk for like quite a few years on the job, and just it was easier to stay on the hamster wheel than get off of it. I was plowing drinks all the time, and just kept on getting promoted, and my tenacity kind of fought through that. And I was a functioning alcoholic, so I just thought, well, I'm not doing anything wrong because I keep on getting promoted, so something must be going right. And I kept on doing what I was doing, and then I got to a time where brands started taking me out and looking after me, and I think there's a huge conversation that needs to be had around responsibility of alcohol brands, because as amazing as it is getting taken out for dinner and drinks by brands, actually the aftercare around that doesn't exist, and that came crashing down really hard and really fast for me. And I definitely had a pretty serious breakdown in January of 2020 when everything just caught up with me and got too much. Not that I was thankful for COVID, but COVID kind of created a break for me when it was most needed. And I think that was the first time I properly considered changing my behavior around alcohol. But yeah, it was a long, long time of that being the norm, of just all day, every day, I thought it defined who I was, and I thought it defined my life.
I thought it defined my life. That's a really interesting concept, and it's one that I definitely recognise. If you're known as someone who loves a drink, who even are you when you stop using alcohol? What if you're a brewer, a pub landlord, a beer writer who no longer drinks beer? Who are you then?
I spent a long time grieving, you know. It's like losing a partner or a friend or a family member. You grieve the loss of it. You grieve the loss of not only that style of your life, your routine, but like I said, defining yourself by it. You feel like you're losing a part of yourself. You come to learn that that it maybe isn't so much the truth, and you're more than that. But I think it can play with your emotions and your brain chemistry to make you believe that you are kind of a slave to it.
But Noah did give up alcohol. And for a time, he believed he could do this whilst pretty much everything else around him stayed the same.
I stopped drinking in April 2022. I was running a wine bar and a restaurant at the time, and I thought I could continue doing that in the same way, exactly the same, except without booze, which on reflection was pretty foolish because I was white-knuckling it daily. I managed it for 3 months, and I think I'm really lucky that I managed to get through that without drinking, because still do it, hosting wine tastings, taking part in wine tastings, curating menus, pairing wine and food. Like, I adored wine, and I made it that was part of intellectualizing my habit when I got into wine, doing qualifications and almost trying to make a romanticism out of addiction. And when I stopped, it was just, every day was a struggle. And you start to question, am I doing the right thing? Again, it goes back to this responsibility conversation. You really start to take notice of how your you have customers' lives in your hands, and sometimes you're maybe valuing profit over health far too much. And I think I started to get far too much in my own head about things. And yeah, when the 3 months were up, I decided to take a break and reevaluate what my plan was for my career, and how I was going to approach working without alcohol being part of that in my body.
Noah makes some interesting points, not only about his own mental health, but about hospitality and the alcohol industry in general. How much responsibility do pubs, breweries and other alcohol producers have to their customers? Should they be doing more to raise awareness of mental health issues or to support their staff and customers in times of crisis? The link between mental health and drinking has always been a part of Luke Boase's thinking around Lucky Saint.
It's been something ever since the very beginning of Lucky Saint. I mean, I guess this comes back, I was at the beginning of 2018, so before we'd launched, I did Dry January in that year. And then I got to the end of Dry January and I'd really enjoyed it. So I then thought, I wonder if I could do 3 months. And then I got to the end of 3 months and I thought, I wonder what would happen if I got to a year. And really the motivation by continuing to want to try going alcohol free for this like sustained period of time was like not least linked to the fact that I was quitting my job and starting a new business, and that was going to come with all of the challenges and bluntly, like I wanted to give myself every chance of success. I didn't want anything to get in the way, and so this was like one of the things. But what happened was I found it was just such a positive thing for me to be able to, wake up and feel great every morning and be able to get more out of my time. And so there was always that kind of intrinsic link between there's something around like mental health and drinking more moderately.
Mental Health First Aid England is a social enterprise company that provides training in mental health knowledge, awareness and skills to businesses and organisations. Engaging with this training was a natural progression for Lucky Saint.
In 2021, we set out to make a third of our business mental health first aid trained. So Mental Health First Aid England have an objective that 1 in 10 people within the workplace are mental health first aid trained, and it's similar to physical first aid, right? You should have people in the building who will know what to do in a moment of crisis. Be able to spot and then know how to approach someone if they believe that they might be struggling with their mental health. So this was a 2-day course that we did with a guy called Harry Corrin, and there'd always been, I felt like this intrinsic link between alcohol-free beer and positive mental health. But as a kind of brand, I don't know, we'd never figured out how those two things could sit well together. And then we spent 2 days with Harry on this course, and the biggest learning that I think I took away from it was mental health first aid, funny enough, is all about knowing what to do in a moment of crisis. But actually I took as much, if not more, away from those 2 days, learning about positive things that we can do to impact our mental health in a good way. So whether that's staying active, staying social, drinking a little bit less. And it was that sort of reframing and I guess figuring out a way of how, I guess, Lucky Saint and what we stand for as a brand suddenly fitted together so naturally with also trying to do positive things around mental health. And so what we did, the conversation with Harry spiraled pretty quickly actually, like after we'd finished the course. And we said, well, what if we took the course that we've just done that's had this amazing impact on our business? And at that point, funny enough, we were training 1 in 3 people within the Lucky Saint team at that point. The first thing we did, we decided to roll it out for everyone. So everyone at Lucky Saint's now a mental health first aider. But then we wanted to also take it to our customers and try and create this ripple effect. So if we can go into a customer, like, for example, the first group that we trained 16 people at Honest Burgers. We've then put 16 people into the Honest Burgers business who are mental health first aid trained, who in turn are touching hundreds of people across that business. So that's amazing. Then we've gone on, we've trained people across much of our customer base.
And in March 2023, Lucky Saint opened its own pub.
So we'd just come out of the back of the first lockdown. We were, at the time, I think there were about 15 of us in the business, and we'd got rid of our office through COVID, and everyone was dying to get back together as a team. And so we were throwing around like, what sort of office should we have? And actually started thinking about, well, surely every pub has an upstairs room, and surely they're not really being used at the moment because of lockdown restrictions, etc. So maybe we could like rent the room above a pub off someone, even better off one of our customers. And then the idea kind of spiraled quite quickly from there, because it went from renting a room above a pub to, well, what about if we also ran the pub, to, well, what if we called the pub the Lucky Saint and it became our brand home? So that was sort of how it kind of came about. And then of course I thought finding a pub would be really easy, but it's really not, especially in central London. But we did end up finding the building that we're sat in today, which is on Devonshire Street in Marylebone, which is a pub that shut for COVID and it never reopened, and it has a kind of illustrious history as the local for the BBC. It's this very iconic building with amazing flowers on the outside, and it completely fallen into disrepair. And the idea behind it really is we've done a big renovation on the building. We have office upstairs, so we have 2 floors of office. Then the ground floor is a trading pub. If you didn't know, it's called the Lucky Saint, but if you didn't know Lucky Saint as a brand, you would walk in and you'd never know it was anything other than a traditional London pub. A little bit lighter, a bit more airy, but in essence it's a classic traditional London pub.
Contrary to what some might assume, the Lucky Saint pub isn't an alcohol-free venue.
So the thinking behind having a pub that serves everything, I guess, is around inclusivity as much as anything. I don't believe that if you're not drinking, you should have to go to a different venue. So all about having a great offering and great choice for everyone. And look, one of our mantras as a business is to break rules, honour traditions, and this was a tradition that we didn't think needed breaking. The pint is one of the most iconic and important traditions in UK culture, and alcohol-free beer is obviously traditionally you've only ever got it in a bottle, and we're amazing as human beings. We all want to feel included. Actually, like no one wants to stand out. So you don't want to be the only person in a group with a bottle of beer rather than a pint. So it's always been an ambition of ours to get Lucky Saint on draft. And I always say, like, if we have Lucky Saint, as soon as Lucky Saint's on draft, like all beers become equal, or as soon as alcohol-free beer is, to have it on draft, like all beers become equal. So it's a great kind of leveler in terms of having a group of people, and just the experience of a pint is something. I guess it's because we've grown up with it, and it's so embedded in like British culture and the British pub. But it's been amazing, and I think it's a huge kind of accelerant to this acceptance piece around drinking alcohol free, because you can be you're part of a round in exactly the same way as any other round, which is amazing, and beer just tastes better out of pint glasses.
And Luke recognises the benefits that socialising in venues such as his can have on people's mental health.
The role that pubs play in mental health, particularly in a post-COVID world where for a period of time through lockdowns etc., we all got very accustomed to being at home, and Netflix and Instagram and all of this stuff. I think the importance of getting back out and socialising and being with people is hugely positive for mental health, whether you're whatever you're drinking actually. I think that role that being with people and socialising and social connection is a hugely positive influence on our mental health.
And I'm pleased to say that Noah Villeneuve is back behind a bar. But it's a bar with a difference.
And I wasn't entirely sure what the next role was going to be. I'd spent the last 12 years honing my skills into hospitality, so it felt almost impossible to think I was going to do anything else. But I also thought maybe I would have to jump ship. So I thought, well, maybe I'll get just a role behind a bar with, less responsibility. I can probably make drinks, serve drinks, and just get through it. And I had numerous interviews with high-profile restaurants and in London, and I'd have conversations with bar managers, and it just didn't go the way I'd wanted. They were not instilling enough faith or trust in my sobriety, basically. And I couldn't jump into another contract that didn't have that trust. So it was a test of patience, and I was really desperate to be somewhere new and experience something new and have new challenges. I got really lucky that one day a friend had shared a post on LinkedIn who worked for a non-alcoholic brand, and that was the job advertisement for the Club Soda tasting room. I obviously knew about Club Soda. It's, the leaders in the field of no and low, and being in hospitality, you know the name Club Soda. I thought, well, this role sounds interesting. I mean, the UK's first no and low alcohol shop and bar. Hey, that could be the way that this means I can stay in the industry and hone my skills and move into a new part of it without having to just ditch everything I'd been learning and bail. So I got really lucky and got given the opportunity, and the last few months have been incredibly rewarding and very fruitful, and I'm very blessed and lucky to have been nurtured in this space by Club Soda.
You may remember that Laura Willoughby talked about Club Soda and its tasting room back in episode 2. Do pay it a visit if you want to try a range of no and low drinks, or even one of Noah's signature cocktails. Through the work of Club Soda, Lucky Saint and others, attitudes are changing, and it's becoming increasingly easier to make mindful choices about our alcohol consumption and our mental health. But perhaps there's more that we could be doing.
We're not doing enough. We're certainly not doing enough outside of hospitality. It's all well and good saying, please drink responsibly, but that is not enough. I'm not going to be anti-alcohol and be like, don't drink. That's not what I'm about. It's not what we're about. We're about behavioural change. We're about mindful drinking, right? Some people can have that option. I wasn't so lucky. I did have to stop, but some people can change their behaviour to have a drink every now and then, or change up their drinking days to have it non-alcoholic. And They can go out to bars and pubs and have a non-alcoholic cocktail, and then an alcoholic cocktail, and then a low alcoholic cocktail. Like it's a interesting and good time to start questioning your drinking behavior, because there's lots of amazing options. In hospitality, we're seeing a lot of conversations open up about it. You know, I think we've lost too many people for decades and decades, and I think alcohol's contribution to that can't be ignored. I certainly think COVID helped us really reframe things and think about things, and then when you start to lose really big stars in the limelight, whether that's chefs or bartenders or celebrities who were known for drinking, etc., the conversation's opened up. There is a dialogue about it, but just because there's a dialogue doesn't necessarily mean there's enough change. What I think is important is that there's, in hospitality, at least bartenders, and this is all I know from my experience, bartenders are at least acknowledging that it is now an important part of running a bar, writing a menu. It has a lot of parallels with like vegan food, for example. I think 10 years ago, chefs would have laughed or got angry at the idea of a vegan ordering in their kitchen, but they came around to the idea, and there's usually a good vegan option on most menus. We're seeing the same thing happen with non-alcoholic drinks. If you value your career in hospitality, you will make sure there is drinks for everyone. Inclusivity is key for people of all walks of life. We don't need to be asking why people need to be changing their drinking behaviors, because there's so many multitudes of reasons why people might not be drinking today. Mental health is one of them. That was the reason I stopped. That's the reason I know a lot of people in hospitality stop. It's an ongoing thing. People are acknowledging that mental health is a thing. I think we aren't ignoring it now. Social media has a part to play in that, which is ironic, because actually it's probably a huge reason that people's mental health is so terrible, but also at least there are people talking about it openly on there. There is more of a wellness trend worldwide. Celebrities are more wellness focused. The whole kind of rock and roll ideology seems to be fading away, which is what I lived and breathed for a really long time. Something, suicide and suicidal ideation, something is very close to my heart, and I've lost people in the industry and not in the industry, and I idolized people in our industry who have taken their own life, and actually I romanticized the idea of even being in the 27 Club for a while, and again, as part of that rock and roll kind of mythology, and there's so many parallels with rock and roll and chefs and bartenders, right? So I think it's why I easily made that jump into hospitality. What more can we be doing in terms of, on top of talking about it, is really tough. I know for a fact that me voicing the fact that it's been a part of my life has made it easier for me. It's really easy to say, let's just talk about it more, all you have to do is talk. It really does help a lot, but more needs to be done. What more is there? I don't have the answers.
Luckily, support is available if you're struggling with your alcohol use or your mental health. There's lots of helpful advice on the NHS website, and you can also speak to your GP or call a listening service like the Samaritans, who are available 24 hours a day on 116 123. Club Soda's website at joinclubsoda.com also contains a wealth of useful information. And if you think someone else's life is at risk, for example if they've taken an overdose or seriously harmed themselves, or you don't think you can keep yourself or somebody else safe, this is a mental health emergency and should be treated just the same as any other health emergency, through calling 999 or going to A&E. And Dr Graham Campbell has some advice.
So if you are experiencing depression, again, I would always advocate talking to somebody about it. Really, being able to confide in someone, get a bit of advice from someone. If that person needs to be a professional, then that's absolutely fine. We don't always want to talk to family and friends. It's even more important if you're starting to feel hopeless, or if you feel like life is futile, if you're having any thoughts about life not being worth living, it's so important to speak to somebody else. Depression can sometimes lead to, suicidal feelings and thoughts about doing harm to yourself, and it's so important to reach out and speak to people if you're not suffering alone, if you're feeling like that. If you speak to your GP, then they sometimes have the ability to refer you to a counsellor. They can sometimes, maybe in some parts of the country, they can even refer you for exercise and other lifestyle things that can help. And sometimes medicine is really helpful. There's lots of talk about antidepressants these days, which can be useful for depression, anxiety, and some other conditions like obsessive compulsive disorder. And there's a lot of people on social media who say, we prescribe too many antidepressants and they don't work, and lots of very sort of negative views about the pharmaceutical industry. But my experience as a psychiatrist is that really antidepressants do help a lot of people, and it's important to know, what you're taking. It's important to test out whether it suits you okay and doesn't cause too many side effects, and it's important to really learn about it. And it's always important with any medicine to kind of talk with a doctor about how to come off it when you no longer need it. But antidepressants can be so helpful in helping people kind of get back on track, and it can be helpful alongside therapy and all the lifestyle advice as well.
And the final word goes to Noah.
I think it's really important to remember that you do have an alternative. It can really seem like there is no alternative when you're really deep in it and no way out. But there are different ways of approaching life, and actually people will support you for it. There will be a network for you. You won't be alone, and you're not alone. Try and find that, whatever, no matter how small the self-belief you have in you, even if it's 1% left, use that and find some inner strength to be tenacious and change your behaviors around drugs and alcohol, and be the best version of yourself that you deserve to be, really. Remind yourself there is another way.
Subscribe to Same Again wherever you get your podcasts to hear more discussion about the complex relationships between beer, pubs and mental health. This podcast series is independent and unsponsored, so it's only been made possible with the support of my wonderful Patreon supporters, which include a number of individuals and the very generous Hofmeister Brewing. If you or your business would like to become a Patreon supporter for as little as £3 a month and gain early and exclusive access to Same Again and more, please head to patreon.com/Emma Inch. Please look after yourself and your friends. I'll see you next time.